Thank you guys for tuning in. Unusual press conference, but it doesn't diminish the excitement. Couldn't be more thrilled to make the announcement of JT returning, and we'll open it up to any questions that you guys have.
First question from Kirsten Watson. Go ahead.
Thank you. Well, exciting day for sure. How important was it to you to secure Justin Turner as one of your final pieces in building out this 2021 roster?
Yeah, I mean, heading into the offseason, obviously you start it and there's a lot of potential pathways that the offseason can go. But for us, all of our, kind of A scenarios in terms of how things played out had JT returning. That being said, obviously we weren't sure that's what was going to happen. But I think anytime you enter into the winter with both sides wanting something to happen, I think it increases the odds. And from our standpoint, and I'm sure for JT's, ideally this would have happened in November. But it's the course of the off season and how things play out. And from our standpoint, we at the beginning of the off season talked to his representative Greg Genske and stated how important JT was to us and what a priority it was for us, but to let him go out and run his process. He's earned the right to be a free agent, and to really go through that, and told them that they wouldn't read about us making a move elsewhere, that we would reach out to them if something was getting hot on our end. Obviously we had to do our work to kind of line up some alternatives in the event it didn't work out, but that ideally we would let their process fully play out and that we would be there, and our optimal outcome was exactly what we're announcing today. So all's well that ends well.
Thank you.
Next question is from David Assay. Go ahead.
Andrew, it sounded like ultimately you believe that the team and Justin were better together than apart. Is that ultimately what your outlook on the off season was as far as bringing him back?
Yeah. JT obviously has been right in the thick of all the success that we've had. And as important as he is to what we do on the field, he's equally as important in the clubhouse, in the community, and just is an incredibly valuable member of our organization, both on the field and off, and in the community. And we value and really respect that. And so from our standpoint, we're definitely a better and stronger organization with JT.
You were pretty forthcoming at the beginning of this offseason wanting to add a right-handed bat. You bring back Justin, you added Noisy. Is that it before opening day, or do you believe there's more options out there that could be had in that department?
I mean, it's more about playing time, especially without a DH. I think we're pretty well set. Position player wise. That being said, I don't think it's our mindset to ever put our feet up and say, we're good, let's go roll out the bats and balls and go. But we feel really good about not just what we're kind of anticipating to be our opening day roster, but also the depth behind it. But to the extent we can continue to augment and add to that, we'll always be on the lookout.
Thank you.
Next question is from Jorge Castillo. Go ahead.
What's up, Andrew? How you doing?
Hi, Jorge.
Did you feel like your chances were hurt or helped, the longer this kind of drew out with Justin?
I don't know. I mean, I think, the longer it goes, just increases, the chances of different things playing out. But from our standpoint, we felt confident that in an ideal world, he wanted to come back. And from our perspective, in an ideal world, we wanted him back. And so I think that always helped kind of soothe and allay those concerns. But I mean, there were definitely days where I was concerned, and there were other days where I felt more optimistic. But, I think we stayed in close communication, and from our standpoint, nothing ever got close enough where we had to go and kind of put that to them of, hey, in the next day or two, we need a resolution. We never got to that point. And so we were able to let them kind of play it out and react when they were ready to fully engage.
Do you see, do you plan to modify maybe how he's used over the course of regular season to make sure he's 100% for October?
I mean, obviously for us, it's every year is a balancing act with our guys of doing everything we can to win as many games and win the division while also keeping guys in a good spot heading into October if we're fortunate enough to make it. So I think we'll just see. I mean, he looks unbelievable when he comes in for his presser. You guys should get him to do a twirl. He looks great. But, it's the benefit of having depth. We don't have to, push any of our guys too hard, especially out of the gates, and then we'll just kind of read and react as we go.
Thank you.
Next question is from Bill Plunkett. Go ahead.
Morning, Andrew.
Hi, William.
How did the DH situation factor into the deal that you ultimately did with Justin, and where do you think it factors in his future?
Yeah, it didn't factor into the deal that we did. It did factor in a lot for us in our planning. To the extent that we were going to have a DH, it allowed us some flexibility to potentially add someone. The timing of the offseason is always a really tricky thing. And so we were having conversations along those lines. And once it became clear that we weren't going to have it, we couldn't just add someone or it would have eaten into, JT's spot, which we weren't willing to do. So it was tricky in that for a large portion of the offseason, we were kind of lining things up, expecting it to be. And then once it wasn't, fortunately, we still had the flexibility. But, again, he looks great. And our expectation is he's our third baseman, and we'll just read and react as we go.
And you talk about these pursuing other options in case things didn't play out. How excited were you about any of these options?
We had a lot of different conversations on the trade front and free agent front and just trying to line things up. Again, I think the most difficult part of the offseason is the timing. I think it's always easy to look back at the end of the offseason and say, oh, well, here's what we know, and this is the order of events that I would do. It's trickier when certain guys are coming off the board earlier. But from our standpoint, our ideal outcome was ending up with Justin returning. And fortunately, we just kind of stayed in contact on that. And, worst case scenario, had he gone somewhere else, we had different alternatives that we felt confident we could execute if it got to that. And so, it just would have played out in a different way. But fortunately, we didn't have to go down those paths.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next question is from Eric Steven. Go ahead.
Andrew, the two trades last week on Friday, with the bullpen, was it a coincidence they were together, or were they like sort of always in tandem? And also, what kind of role you see Sheldon Noisy playing on this team?
Yeah, those trades were in large part, after we signed Bauer, just feeling like the depth we had in our pitching staff, both AK and Flo were very valued members of our organization. Obviously what they did on the field, but also, great in the clubhouse. And, talking to those guys when we traded them, I talked about how uncomfortable and this conversation is and not an ideal one from our perspective, but the only conversation that would be worse is if at the end of spring training we were sending them down. And that could have been how it played out with the depth that we have right now, and that they're really good major league relievers. And so we were able to acquire some guys that, kind of pushes value forward a little bit. And so from our standpoint, it felt like it made sense, but we also felt like it was the right thing to do for those guys. And Noisy is, a guy that was a really good defender on the infield and we think there's some offensive upside that we can tap into. You know, the reports we got on him were really strong in terms of the way his mind works and the curiosity. And I think him pairing with our hitting guys, you know, we have a chance for, you know, something really special to click. And, you know, we'll take the chance to get to know him better over the next few weeks and figure out the timing of when and how to do those things. And whether it's a slow drip or, you know, something, you know, more drastic than that. I think until we have a chance to work with them, it's a tough question to answer right now.
Have you picked the second player to be named in the Ross Stripling trade yet, or is that coming soon?
It's coming soon.
Thanks.
I got time for one more. Go ahead.
Andrew, just based on the numbers we see publicly, at least your payroll is beyond 250 mil, which is the sort of third threshold for the CBT. Just wondering, you know, obviously money's money, but there's also the draft pick penalty that might sting a little bit for you guys. Just wondering if you guys are trying to move down underneath, drop under 250 million at some point.
Yeah, I mean, I think our primary focus is on doing everything we can to defend our title. And, you know, trade discussions, I'm sure will take place during spring training, but it's not something that's front of mind for us in terms of moving money. You know, the moves and things that we've done the previous 3 years gave us a little bit more flexibility right now. And, you know, I think from our standpoint, we feel really good about the team we have in place. And we know that there's some added cost associated with it, which is not ideal, and it is a cost. But we feel like with where we are and the team we have, that the reward kind of outweighs that. And so we're at a level right now that's not sustainable. But again, we don't ever view our payroll in any one moment in time, really view it over, you know, 2, 3, 4, 5 year period. And so from where we are right now, I wouldn't be surprised at all if this is where we finish the year, and we're okay with it and factored it in. But feel really, really good about the core talent that we have in place.
Thanks, Andrew. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, guys. And don't forget to make JT do the twirl.